The horse was dying. It had been limping since before the sun came up, but now the animal's flanks shivered with exhaustion, and blood leaked from where the last rock slide had scraped its hind leg raw. Elias Redhawk slid from the saddle before it collapsed under him. The leather creaked, dust billowed around his boots as he crouched beside the animal. "You made it farther than most," he muttered, running a hand over its neck. The horse snorted, eyes rolling. Elias drew his knife and did what needed doing. One clean stroke across the jugular. No suffering, just silence and sun. He stood in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by mesquite, dry air, and a bloodstain already soaking into the sand. Wind swept over the Tularosa basin in long, whistling breaths. Far off, the mountains stood like gods with broken teeth. The nearest town, Santa Perdita, lay just 10 miles east. If his memory served, he looked down at the dead horse, at the fading trail behind him, then at the wide nothing ahead. He started walking. Santa Perdita smelled like sweat, pine soap, and lies. It always had. The town hadn't changed much since the last time Elias passed through 3 years ago. Same crooked steeple leaning too far left, same red-dusted road with boards that popped under your boots like warning shots. The saloon was still called the Widow's Prayer. He passed it without slowing. Men turned to look, some nodded, others looked away fast. Good, he preferred it that way. He ducked into the sheriff's office as the sun reached its high point. The air inside was cooler, though not by much. "Didn't think I'd see you back here, Redhawk," Sheriff Mateo Callahan said, seated behind a desk, scattered with half-sorted papers and 2 empty coffee cups. "I didn't plan to be," Elias replied. He pulled the folded telegram from his coat. "But you sent for me." Callahan scratched his graying beard, then motioned him to sit. "Word is, one of the Sombra Roja boys is coming through town. Tomorrow, stagecoach from Las Cruces." Elias didn't sit. He leaned against the post by the window. "You sure?" The sheriff nodded slowly. "Message came from a marshal out east," said the man's using the name Ignacio Fuentes now, "but real name is Jacinto Rios. He's wanted for robbery, assault, and murder. $800 reward, dead or alive. Guess which is easier." "Alive is cleaner, but not easier." Callahan looked at him hard. "This one's got a record like yours, Elias. Maybe worse." Elias said nothing. His eyes drifted out the window, watching townsfolk cross the street in lazy ox ladies with baskets, boys chasing a stray dog, a man hauling a sack of flour that leaked behind him like dust from a broken hourglass. "I can handle it," he said. "I know you can. That's what scares me." By evening, he had secured a room in a boarding house above the apothecary. He didn't unpack. There wasn't much to unpack anyway. His journal, a revolver he hadn't cleaned since Roswell, a photograph he never looked at unless drunk. He sat at the window, cleaning his weapon with slow precision, every motion practiced, exact. Outside, lanterns flickered to life along the boardwalk. Music drifted from the Widow's Prayer fiddle piano. Laughter half-choked with cheap whiskey. Elias was reaching for the bullets when he saw her. She was late. Everyone else had arrived already, but the church social was still in full swing, laughter spilling through open windows. Skirts swishing past his line of sight when she stepped into view. Alma Navarro. She moved fast, breathless but composed. Her dress was a dark green that caught the last of the sunlight like moss catching dew. Hair pinned back, face flushed with heat and distance. She smiled as she apologized to someone at the door. Her voice clear, melodic, undeniably firm cut through the noise. Elias froze. Not because she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. She wasn't, but something in the way she moved, like she had nothing to prove, and no patience for fools, struck him clean through the ribs. He set the revolver down. Forgot the bullets. Sheriff Mateo found him 20 minutes later at the church. "You going in?" he asked. "No." Elias stared through the window. "Maybe. You look like a man trying to fight a wildfire with a wet glove." Elias didn't answer. "She's the new doctor, Alma Navarro. Came down from Santa Fe to help her uncle, the drunk one. Folks weren't sure what to make of her at first. Now they're scared of disappointing her. She doesn't look like she's from around here. She doesn't act like it either." The sheriff handed him a cup of punch. "Neither do you. I don't belong here. Neither does she." Inside, Alma laughed at something a rancher said. Then she turned, as if feeling the weight of Elias's gaze. Their eyes met through the window. She didn't smile, didn't look away. Elias blinked first. He left the cup of punch on the railing and turned to walk away. But Sheriff Mateo spoke again. "Just so you know," he said, "she's more than she looks. Nose, bones and blood, and all the Latin words that keep men alive. She doesn't flinch when they scream. Saved 2 men last week, one with a bullet in his lung, the other with his guts outside his belly." Elias grunted. "She's not afraid of death, Red Hot. Are you?" He didn't answer, he just kept walking. The sun bled out behind the mountains, and Santa Perdita cooled. Elias sat on the edge of his narrow bed, staring at the blank wall across the room. Something tugged inside him, unfamiliar, unsettling. He'd come for a bounty, just another job, just another ghost to send back into the dirt. But now a new question gnawed at him. Was he still the kind of man who could leave before something good asked him to stay? "That woman is going to get someone killed," Elias muttered, not sure if he meant himself. The morning air in Santa Perdita held a crispness Elias hadn't felt in months. It cut through the lingering heat of the day before, brushing along his collarbone like a warning. He'd slept no more than an hour, if that. His dreams were fractured gunshots with no source. Eyes he couldn't name, Alma Navarro turning away before he could speak. Now, he stood on the porch of the boarding house, arms crossed, watching the town stir. Boots clicked on the wooden boards behind him. "You didn't stay for pie," said Sheriff Mateo, biting into a slice of peach with no shame about the mess it made on his vest. "I wasn't hungry," Elias said without turning. "That's a damn shame. Alma's pies are nearly as good as her stitching." Elias glanced back. "She baked." Mateo smirked. "You look surprised. I don't peg her for the apron type. She's not. That's why it's impressive. Only bakes when she's angry." Elias arched an eyebrow. "She angry last night. Always. That's how she stays sharp." Mateo chewed thoughtfully. "You keep looking like that. You'll scare her off." "I wasn't looking. You were staring." "I don't stare." "You do now." Elias exhaled slowly and turned back to the street. The town had begun its morning rituals. Shopkeepers sweeping stoops, a pair of nuns crossing to the chapel, boys already in trouble chasing a runaway mule. Amidst it all, the clinic door opened. There she was. Alma Navarro stepped out in a dark skirt and high boots, white sleeves rolled to the elbows. Her satchel bumped against her hip as she moved with purpose, headed toward the butcher shop. She didn't glance sideways. She didn't hesitate. She moved like she owned the dirt under her feet. Elias felt his jaw tighten. What's her story? Mateo licked peach from his thumb. She trained in Santa Fe, got expelled from a hospital for arguing with a surgeon in public, saved a child no one else would touch because of the fever, then came here. Why? Doesn't talk about it. Elias squinted into the sun. People like her don't just show up in places like this. You did, Mateo said. Maybe you both needed somewhere quiet to fight your ghosts. Later that day, Elias walked past the clinic deliberately, though he wouldn't admit it. He paused by the post office, pretending to read a flyer nailed to the board. From inside the clinic came voices, Alma, speaking sharply in Spanish, then a child's whimper. The door was open. She hadn't seen him yet, but what he saw stopped him. Cold. Alma knelt beside a boy no older than 6. His hand was wrapped in blood-soaked cloth. She worked with speed but never rushed, calm, precise, kind. When the boy cried, she didn't shush him. She nodded, letting him feel it, and kept sewing the skin along his palm. A young girl saw. Elias' guest stood nearby with a bowl of clean water. She handed Alma a cloth, then leaned in close and whispered something. Alma laughed, low and warm. That sound did something to Ilias's ribs. He turned before she could see him, and walked off down the road. By late afternoon, the sun pressed down like a hand on the back of the neck. Elias sat outside the widow's prayer, boots on the rail, nursing a glass of water more than whiskey. Nita Chavez leaned on the doorway behind him. You watching her again? I'm watching the street. She smirked. It's a short street. Elias didn't reply. Nita folded her arms. Alma's a hard one to ignore. I get it. She talks like a preacher and sews like a devil. She always that calm. Only on the outside. Inside, Nita tilted her head. That woman's a hurricane that remembers what it felt like to drown. Elias finally looked at her. You talk too much. Not as much as you don't. Nita tossed her dark braid over her shoulder. Just don't try to fix her. You'd bleed out before she let you. That evening, Elias caught her in the middle of the street. She was carrying a box of medical supplies from the general store to the clinic. He stepped into her path. Let me take that. She didn't flinch. Why, think I'll drop it? I think your arm's bruised. From earlier, I saw you wince. Alma narrowed her eyes. You're observant. It's my job. She handed him the box. All right, gunslinger. Since you're so observant, what else do you think you know about me? Elias carried the box as they walked. You've been hurt before, more than once. You don't run from pain. You study it. That's poetic. She paused. And wrong. No, I don't study pain. I make it earn its stay. He glanced over. That a threat? It's a principle. They reached the clinic steps. She unlocked the door, nodded for him to follow. Inside. Everything was spotless. Bottles labeled in Spanish and Latin. Linen folded with soldierly precision. A map of veins and arteries nailed above the desk. She gestured to the counter. You can set it there. He did. She didn't thank him, but she also didn't ask him to leave. Instead, she said, most men who come here look at my hands before they listen to my words. You looked at my eyes first. Elias didn't respond right away. He took in the room, the light slanting through the shutters, the faint scent of lavender and steel. You look like someone who doesn't blink, he said finally. Figured if I did first, I'd miss something important. Alma smiled for the first time. Not wide, not soft, but real. You didn't miss anything, she said. Not yet. Then, softer, she added, I came here to forget a name. What name? She shook her head. Not ready for that. He nodded once, understanding without needing more. Outside, thunder rolled in the far distance. Storm clouds were forming on the edge of the basin, where dust storms and memories collided. Elias turned to leave. I meant to ask. Alma called after him. What name do you go by? He paused. Elias Redhawk. That your birth name? He looked over his shoulder. It's the one I've earned. Their eyes locked again. Her eyes said one thing. I see through your silence and it doesn't scare me. The scream came at dawn. Elias was already awake. He hadn't slept. Not really, just lay still on the stiff mattress with his boots on, hand on the butt of his Colt, listening to the creaks of a town that never quite went quiet. When the sound tore through the street, a man's voice, shrill with panic. He was out the door before his hat hit his head. The wind was thick with dust, the kind that stuck in your teeth and made your eyes sting. He followed the sound, half running past the mercantile, his coat flaring behind him like a shadow too fast to catch. Down at the old Blakely mine, a crowd had gathered. Men shouted over each other. A mule brayed from its post. Two women clutched each other near the edge of the slope. A miner stumbled forward, face gray, mouth bloody, collapsed. He gasped. The south shafted just went down. Charlie and Ben, he pointed a trembling hand. They're still in there. Elias pushed through, ignoring the questions flying at him. The ground trembled once, a low groan from the earth itself. The mine had been a scar on this land for years, a gash dug by men who didn't care what bled out. Now it was swallowing its own. He stepped to the edge of the shaft. Black air and loose timber stared back. Then he heard it, a faint voice, weak, barely there. Help. He turned. We need rope, shovel, and a torch. Now one of the miners blinked. You ain't going down there, are you? Elias didn't answer. He was already removing his coat. Alma arrived not 5 minutes later. Breath, ragged, boots, muddy, satchel slung across her chest. Marisol trailed her, carrying supplies with both hands and a determined scowl. What happened? Alma asked, already pulling gloves from her pocket. Elias turned to her as he looped the rope around his waist. Mine collapse. 2 men inside. I'll pull them out. Her eyes flicked to the hole, then back to him. How long have they been trapped? Can't be more than half an hour. Then we might still have a pulse. She turned to Mary. Heat, water, lay out bandages. I want someone ready to take vitals the second they come up. I'm going in, Elias said. No, you're not. Their eyes locked. The crowd faded. You don't know the structure. It's unstable, she said. Let me go first. You're smaller, he admitted, but I'm faster. And if the beams come down, then we both die, she snapped. But if I don't see the damage myself, I can't treat them when they come up. This isn't your fight, Elias. He stared at her, face hard, breath low. Then, without a word, he grabbed another rope. Tie me to your harness. You go first. I'll be behind you. She hesitated. I don't trust the dark, he said, but I trust you. And just like that, she moved. The descent was slow. The earth smelled of copper and wet rot. Beams groaned. Dust fell in choking clouds. Alma led the way, torch held high. Elias followed close, one hand on the rope, the other on his sidearm. They found the first man buried under half a wall, his leg bent at a wrong angle, eyes fluttering. Alma checked his breathing while Elias began moving wood. "Charlie," she said, "he's going into shock. I'll carry him." "You sure?" "I'm stronger than I look." She gave a half smile. "You look plenty strong. That's not what worries me." "What does?" "You're bleeding," she said, pointing to his forearm. A jagged slice showed where a nail had caught him on the way down. "He'll keep." Together, they hauled Charlie out of the debris. Elias cradled him like a child, Alma checking every few feet to keep him breathing. Then they heard the second man. Ben. His cries were more frantic. Closer, trapped, behind a wall of collapsed rock. Alma cursed in Spanish. "We can't move that." "Without a pulley," she said. "I can break through the side," Elias said, moving to an edge of the blockage where the wood was soft. "It could bring the rest down." "We don't have time." Alma pressed her hand to the stone, then to his chest. "Don't get buried. I don't stitch ghosts." Elias gave her a nod, then began hammering with a loose beam. The sound echoed like thunder. After 3 minutes, a hole formed. Ben's arm reached through, fingers bloody, trembling. Elias grabbed it. "Hold on." Then the timber above shifted. "Move," Alma shouted. They barely made it out as the tunnel behind them crumbled in a roar. Dust and rock chased them like an avalanche, but Elias shielded both men with his back, gritting his teeth against the weight. When they finally burst into daylight, the crowd surged forward. Applause broke like rain. Elias collapsed beside Alma. Chest heaving, she pressed a cloth to his arm. "You idiot, did we get them?" She nodded. He lay back in the dirt, laughing dryly. "I was due for a bath anyway." Later, when the clinic quieted and the town returned to its usual gossip and drinks, Elias sat on the porch outside, his arm wrapped in clean linen, ribs aching, dust still in his hair. Alma joined him, Marisol asleep inside. "You've done that before," she said. "Gone into a mine?" "No. Rushed into a place no sane man would go." He looked at her. "You're one to talk." She smiled faintly. "I've always been reckless, but not fearless, me neither." They sat in silence. Then she said, "Why do it? You didn't know those men." "I didn't do it for them." She turned toward him, studying his profile in the dusk. "Then who?" she asked. Elias didn't answer, but his eyes drifted to her hand, to the smudge of blood, still on her cheek. She wiped the blood from her cheek and said, "Next time, bring a cleaner knife." The night was thick with heat and the low hum of insects, the kind of evening where the sweat never quite dried and the quiet was too sharp. Elias sat at the edge of his bed, revolver in his lap, cleaning it for the second time. The room smelled like gun oil and old paper. Moonlight streamed through the half-shut shutters, striping the floor like prison bars. He wasn't tired. His body ached from the mine, but his mind was wired tight. Alma's words echoed somewhere beneath the silence. "Next time, bring a cleaner knife." He smirked at the memory. There had been something in her voice, not teasing, not angry, something like trust. He hadn't heard that in a long time. A breeze slipped through the open window. It carried the faintest sound, leather scraping against gravel. Then footsteps. Elias froze. He moved to the window, all senses firing. Down below, the street was empty, but shadows shifted near the apothecary's alley. He moved quietly, gun in hand, and stepped out. The alley was narrow and dark, lined with crates and stacked barrels. Somewhere overhead, a sign creaked lazily in the breeze. He crouched low behind a water trough. The figure emerged from the side of the clinic, moving in slow, deliberate steps. Male, average height, hat pulled low, something in his hand. Elias stepped out. Midnight's a bad time to sneak around a doctor's door. The man spun fast and raised a pistol. Elias fired first. The shot cracked like a whip. The stranger stumbled back, clutching his thigh. His weapon clattered to the ground. Elias approached with calm steps, revolver still raised. The man moaned. "Please, I wasn't going to hurt her." "Liar," Elias said, and kicked the pistol away. Then he knelt, grabbed the man's collar, and dragged him into the lantern light. Blood stained the man's trousers, but not enough to kill him. Elias recognized the tattoo on his forearm, a jagged red sun, Sombra Roja. His gut twisted. He hadn't heard that name in 2 years. He pressed the barrel of his Colt to the man's temple. "Who sent you?" The man whimpered. "I was just told to watch her, that's all. Make sure she stayed in town until Diego gave the word." "Diego?" Elias's voice dropped an octave. "El Curvo. He's coming." Elias's hand tensed. "You tell El Curvo," he said, voice cold as stone, "that Elias Redhawk is already here." He slammed the butt of the gun into the man's temple. The body went limp. Sheriff Mateo Callahan arrived 10 minutes later, half-dressed and half-angry. "You knock a man unconscious, shoot him in the leg, and don't even leave a note." "He was waiting outside the clinic," Elias said, arms folded, watching Alma. Mateo's face hardened. "He one of them. Sombra Hoja, no question?" The sheriff swore under his breath, then looked at the man again. "I'll throw him in the cell. Quietly. We don't need panic," he said. "El Curvo's coming." Mateo looked up sharply. "You sure?" "That's what he said." Damn, Mateo rubbed his face. "Redhawk, if this turns into a war, I'll finish it before it does." "That's not what I'm asking." Elias glanced toward the clinic. "You're worried about the town." "I'm worried about the doctor." Elias didn't answer, but the fire behind his eyes said enough. Alma stood barefoot in the doorway when Elias returned, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was loose, a rare sight. "You fired a shot," she said. "I heard it." He didn't answer immediately. She stepped back, letting him inside. "Someone was watching your clinic," he said. "I stopped them." Her lips pressed into a tight line. "Did they say why?" "Because of you." She turned away, hands trembling. "I knew it had followed me." Elias stepped closer. "What would—" She faced him. "I treated a man once, in Santa Fe. He'd been shot. I saved him. Then I found out what he was, what he'd done. He was Sombra Roja. I reported him. The sheriff tried to arrest him 3 days later. The man disappeared. 2 nights after that, my clinic burned." Elias stared. "I left Santa Fe after that," she said. "Took the first train I could, ended up here. You think this is connected?" "I know it is." Elias nodded slowly. "They want you scared," he said. "They want you to run." "I won't." "Good." He paused. "Because I'm staying." She blinked. "You are. Until this is over." Alma studied him for a long moment. "You don't strike me as the protector type." "I'm not. So why stay?" He looked at her, tired but resolute. "Because someone should." A beat of silence passed. Then she said quietly, "I'm not helpless." "Elias, I know. Don't treat me like a burden." "I wouldn't dare." They stood there in the dark, 2 ghosts staring at each other, trying not to disappear. Later that night, Elias stood on the clinic's roof with his rifle across his knees. The stars were clear, the wind dry. He watched every movement in the street below. Nothing came, but his thoughts didn't quiet. El Curvo. The name was a scar. Across memory, he'd once called the man brother, had ridden beside him, killed for him, and left him behind when the blood got too deep. If El Curvo was coming to Santa Fe, it wouldn't just be about Alma, it would be about revenge. At dawn, Alma found Elias still on the roof, silhouetted against the rising sun. "You didn't sleep," she said, bringing him a mug of coffee. He took it, nodding thanks. She sat beside him, knees pulled to her chest. For a while, they didn't speak. Then she said, "You saved my life." He looked at her. "I know now. What are you going to do with it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a long sip from the mug, eyes locked on the horizon. "You saved my life," she said. "Now what are you going to do with it?" The desert was always quietest at dawn, before the heat woke up, before the wind remembered it had somewhere to go. Elias Redhawk walked the edge of town in that hush, the stillness fitting him like an old coat. His boots pressed the dirt road, slow and even, every step measured, purposeful. He wasn't patrolling, he was thinking. The man from the Sombra Roja, the name El Curvo, the fire in Alma's voice when she'd told him she wouldn't run. He hadn't meant to stay in Santa Fe, but now the thought of leaving felt like trying to tear off a part of himself. He hadn't figured out what that part was yet, just that it was awake now and it didn't want to sleep again. "You walk like you've done something wrong," said a voice behind him. Elias turned. Sheriff Mateo stood near the hitching post, arms folded, a thin cigar clenched between his teeth. "Just restless," Elias muttered. "You and me both," Mateo said. "I've had nightmares all week, the kind that don't end when you open your eyes." Elias gave a dry nod. "El Curvo's got that effect." The sheriff spat into the dust. "How long you think we have?" "No telling. Could be days, could be tomorrow." Mateo cursed under his breath. "Town doesn't know it yet, but we're sitting on a powder keg. Then maybe it's time we light a match." The sheriff looked at him. "You planning to go looking for trouble?" "I think trouble's already looking for us." We may as well be ready. That afternoon, Ilias helped Alma repair the back window of her clinic. Someone had tried to force it open the night before, left gouges in the wood. She hadn't said much about it, just tightened her jaw and brought out the tools. "You're hitting that nail sideways," she said. Ilias gave her a look. "Then hand me a better hammer." She passed it without argument, their fingers brushing. Neither spoke on it. "Are you always like this?" she asked. "Like what?" "Brooding, stoic, quiet until spoken to." "Sometimes I talk to horses." Alma laughed under her breath. Poor things. They worked in silence for a while. The air was thick with sawdust and desert heat. "You ever think about leaving?" Ilias asked suddenly. She paused, gaze still on the window frame. "I've left enough places to know it never solves what you carry." "What do you carry?" She turned to him. "Regret, guilt, the usual sins." He nodded slowly. "Same." She tilted her head. "And here I thought you were just full of dust and lead." "Maybe, but the weight feels about the same." That evening, a stranger rode into town from the west. He wore a blue serape, dusty boots, and a wide-brimmed hat low over his face. His horse was lean and hard, like it had seen more hunger than hay. Ilias saw him first, standing just outside the widow's prayer with a glass of watered-down whiskey. The stranger dismounted slow, deliberate, and tied his horse near the well. Then he walked with a limp toward the general store. Ilias stepped off the porch and intercepted him. "You lost." The man looked up. His eyes were sharp, gray like slate. "Not anymore," he said. "Looking for Alma Navarro." "Why?" "She knows Jonas 10 Bears." Ilias narrowed his eyes. "And you?" "I'm his grandson." Minutes later, Alma opened the clinic door and nearly dropped the bandage she was folding. She said, stunned. The young man smiled. "It's been a long time, Doctora." She ushered him inside, pulling Ilias with her. Angel explained that Jonas 10 Bears had sent him. The old Mescalero elder had seen visions, shadows gathering, an old name rising from ash. Alma asked. Angel nodded. "My grandfather says he's closer than the mountains now." Ilias clenched his jaw. "Then why send you?" "Because I know what he's capable of," Angel said. "And because my grandfather thinks you might need reminding of who you were before you became a ghost." Ilias frowned. "Jonas always speak in riddles." Angel smiled. "Only when he's afraid of what comes next." That night, Alma and Ilias stood on the clinic's porch. The wind had picked up, carrying the smell of sage and something distant, wood smoke or memory. "He's different," Alma said. "Angel, younger than I remember, but steady. Jonas raised him. After his mother died, I treated her once. Long time ago." She paused. "You ever meet Jonas?" "Once. Years back. I was bleeding. He didn't say a word. Just looked at me like he could see every mistake I hadn't made yet. He probably could." Ilias rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't like prophecy. It doesn't leave room for choice." "Maybe it's not about what you will do," she said. "Maybe it's about what you've already decided and just haven't faced." He glanced at her. "And what do you think I've decided?" "That you're tired of running." They stood there a while. Then Marisol opened the door behind them, eyes wide. "There's smoke," she said. "Northridge bright." Ilias moved fast, rifle in hand. From the edge of town, they watched as orange flames lit the distant hill, a ranch house, one of the outposts, burning. Ilias narrowed his eyes. Sombra Roja was sending a message. By the time they reached the ridge, it was ash and heat. The house had collapsed in on itself. Livestock scattered. A wagon burned to the axle, but no bodies. Sheriff Mateo rode up from the south trail, breathless, empty. He asked to clean. Ilias said, "They wanted us to see this, but not find anything." Mateo looked grim. "Town's gonna panic when they hear." "Let them," Ilias said. "Might be the only way to get them ready." He turned to Alma, who had ridden up quietly behind him. "We need to talk to Jonas." She nodded. "I'll send word." He looked back at the smoke curling into the sky, black against the stars. This is only the start. That night, Ilias sat alone on the roof again. Alma didn't join him this time. He could see the flicker of her lamp through the clinic window, her silhouette moving between shelves. He leaned his rifle across his knees, thought of Angel's eyes, of Alma's voice, of El Curvo's shadow getting closer. He whispered to no one, "I came for a bounty, but I think I'm hunting the wrong thing." "I came for a bounty," Ilias said, "but I think I'm hunting the wrong thing." Jonas 10 Bears lived where the wind never stopped. Ilias hadn't been back to the mesa in 7 years, but the land remembered him. The road was little more than dust and dry brush now, winding past jagged rocks that looked like broken spines. The sky stretched wide overhead, impossibly blue, with clouds trailing like smoke signals. Even the silence here carried weight, like the earth itself was listening. He rode with Alma, Angel and Sheriff Mateo, their horses kicking up small storms behind them. The sun was brutal, but Elias barely felt it. His mind stayed ahead, already at the summit, already looking Jonas in the eye. "He's not what you expect," Alma warned softly. "I'm not here for comfort," Elias said. "I know," she said. "He never gives it." They reached the camp at dusk. 3 hogans stood near the edge of the ridge, their doors facing east. Smoke rose from a cooking fire, carrying the scent of corn and cedar. A pair of dogs watched the group approach but didn't bark. They just stood like carved sentries, eyes steady. Jonas sat on a low stool outside his door, wrapped in a thick blanket, despite the heat. His hair was white now, braided and tied in the old way, and his face was a map of decades. His eyes piercing, clouded with time, but sharp beneath. It lifted slowly as they dismounted. "Elias Redhawk," he said. His voice was deep, steady. "Come to look your shadow in the face." Elias removed his hat. "I guess it's about time." Jonas nodded once. "Then sit. The fire is ready." They gathered around the flames. Alma stayed quiet, kneeling beside Anj, who said little but kept his eyes on his grandfather with open reverence. Jonas stared at Elias for a long moment before speaking. "You carry the past, like a man trying not to let it touch him." "I carry it, because it's mine." "Then stop dragging it behind you. Either bury it or wear it." Elias didn't answer. Jonas leaned forward, the light catching his weathered face. "You think El Curvo is coming to punish you, but he's not. He's coming to complete what he started." Elias's hands clenched into fists. "Back then," Jonas went on, "you walked away. You left him with blood on his boots and no one to answer to. He made his choices," Elias said, "and now you must face yours." The fire popped. Jonas pulled something from his coat, an old photograph, creased and worn. 4 men stood shoulder to shoulder, younger versions of themselves, Elias and El Qued, 2 others now long dead. "Do you remember this?" Jonas asked. Elias nodded once. "You were brothers once, and now he's coming to erase your name. He can try." Jonas looked at Alma. "And you hold something of value to him." She stiffened. "I don't know why." "Because you matter to Elias." Alma blinked. "So this is about vengeance?" "No," Jonas said softly. "This is about inheritance. El Cuervo doesn't want to kill Elias. He wants to take his place." That silenced the fire for a moment. Elias stared at the flames, his voice low. "He won't." Jonas stood slowly, bones cracking with age. "Then you need to remember who you were before you became a ghost. You need to be the man I saw in the dirt, with blood on his hands, broken. Yes, but not lost." Elias looked up at him. "And if I'm still broken, then fight like a man with nothing left to lose." After dinner, Elias wandered to the edge of the mesa alone. The stars were thick above him now, brighter than anywhere else he'd been. He remembered this place as a boy riding with his uncle, learning how to shoot, how to read the wind, how to listen. A voice joined him. Alma. She didn't speak for a while, just stood beside him, her shawl wrapped tight, the wind tugging at her dark hair. "What do you see?" she asked. "Everything," Elias said, "and nothing that makes sense." She gave a small smile. "Jonas always speaks in riddles. He's not wrong. I've been running too long." She looked at him sideways. "So stop." He turned to her. "It's not that easy." "It's exactly that easy," she said. "You just decide." Elias stared at her. "You're not just a bounty hunter," she said. "You're a man who came back." "Back to what?" "To whatever this is." She gestured to the mesa, to the stars, to herself, to the fight, to yourself. He didn't speak for a while. Then he said, "He's going to come for you." "I know. Are you scared?" "Yes, but that doesn't change anything." Elias stepped closer. The space between them shrank like the desert at dusk. "You don't run," he said. "Neither do you," she whispered, and for a brief second, something passed between them, soft, unsaid, but real. Then Angel appeared, urgency in his step. "Something's wrong," he said. "One of the lookouts saw riders near the old canyon trail. Could be scouts." Elias's face turned to stone. "Then we leave at first light." At dawn, Jonas stood at the edge of the ridge, watching them prepare. Elias tightened the strap of his saddlebag. Alma checked her medical kit. Mateo double-checked his shotgun. Angel carried extra rounds in his coat pockets. Before they left, Jonas put a hand on Elias's shoulder. "You are not the same man who rode away," the elder said. "Make sure you are not the same one who returns." Elias nodded. As they descended the mesa, the land opened wide before them, flat, dry, and full of danger. They rode in silence. But in Elias's chest, something had shifted. A weight lifted. A fire sparked. He had left the mesa with one truth carved into him like a scar. "I wasn't born for peace," Elias muttered, "but I was raised to protect it." The ride back to Santa Perdida was different, not because of the trail. They took the same broken path along the edge of the canyon, through dry brush and sun-baked silence, but because of what hung in the air between them, a tension thick as storm clouds. Elias rode ahead, rifle slung low, eyes sweeping the horizon. His jaws stayed tight, his mind sharper than ever. He'd always trusted his instincts more than his memory, and right now, every instinct screamed the same thing. They were being watched. Behind him, Alma rode just to the left of Angel. Mateo brought up the rear, checking their flank. No one spoke for a good hour. The only sounds were horses breathing, saddle leather creaking, and the wind picking at the rocks like a dog with old bones. Elias finally broke the silence. "How far to the water station?" "Another 5 miles," Angel answered. "But we can't stop there." "Why not? Last time I came through, it was already picked over. No livestock, no tracks, just silence. Ambush, maybe, or a warning." Elias didn't like either option. He glanced toward Alma, who caught his look but said nothing. She hadn't spoken much since they'd left. Jonas, something in her had shifted too. They stopped just before the ridge broke into open flats. From the bluff, Santa Perdida was visible in the distance, quiet, sun-bleached, unaware. Elias dismounted and took out a spyglass from his saddlebag. He scanned the horizon, first toward the west where the mountains sat like sleeping giants, then toward the northern trail. Dust, not from the wind. "From Ryder's company," he said, passing the glass to Mateo. "Half a mile, maybe more. They're following our trail." Mateo swore. "How many?" "Too many for scouts. Not enough for a full attack. I count 6. "Could be a message," Angel offered. "Could be bait." Elias looked toward the canyon edge. "We make our stand here." Alma turned sharply. "No, not here. Too exposed." "That's the point," Elias said. "They think we'll run." Mateo gave him a sideways glance. "You're betting they'll chase." "I'm betting they already want to fight. Let's give it to them with the high ground." He pointed to a narrow strip of ridge a few hundred feet back, where stone columns stood like sentinels. "There, one way in, one way out." Alma frowned. "What about the town?" Elias met her eyes. "We stop them here, they don't reach the town." She nodded once. "Then let's finish this." They moved fast, tying the horses in a dead grove tucked behind a stone rise. Alma unpacked her satchel and laid out supplies with the calm of someone preparing for surgery. Angel loaded bullets into his revolver with hands steadier than his age should allow. Mateo cleaned the sand from the barrel of his shotgun. Elias checked his rifle one last time. "Positions," he said. "Angel, take the far side. Stay low, wait for my shot." "Understood." "Mateo with me. You cover the entrance. And the dock." Alma didn't wait for Elias to speak. "I'll be between you and Angel, close enough to help if anyone's hit, far enough not to slow you down." Elias nodded once, then he whispered, almost to himself, "Let's make this count." The riders came like wraiths, 6 men, all in dark dusters, red sashes tied around their arms. One carried 2 had rifles slung across their backs. All wore the same insignia burned into their belts. The blood son of Sombra, Roja. Elias watched them draw closer. He could see it in the way they rode, arrogant, controlled, like they thought the desert belonged to them. He waited until they reached the mouth of the stone corridor, then fired. The lead rider fell instantly, a clean shot through the collarbone. Chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked off the rocks. Dust flew. One of the men returned fire to height, scattering harmlessly into the sky. Mateo's shotgun boomed. Angel flanked the left side, catching one of the men as he tried to retreat. Within minutes, it was down to 2. One ran, the last tall, with a scar cutting across his face, held his ground. He stared up at Elias with hatred burning behind his eyes. "Red," he shouted. "El Curvo knows you're here." "Good," Elias said coldly, stepping forward, rifle raised. He said to leave you bleeding in the dust. Said to take the woman. Elias didn't hesitate. He shot the man in the leg, then strode down the slope and kicked his weapon away. The man writhed, cursing. Elias knelt beside him, low and deadly calm. Tell your boss he'll have to come himself. The man spat. He will look good, Elias said again, and pistol whipped him hard enough to knock him out. They regrouped in silence. The wind had picked up again, but the air was thicker, now charged with something unspoken. Mateo wiped sweat from his brow. That was too easy. Angel nodded. They were testing us. Alma crouched beside one of the bodies, checking for anything useful. She found a small bloodied map tucked in the man's coat. She handed it to Elias. He opened it slowly. Santa Perdida. Circled in red. Several arrows pointed toward it from different sides, north, west, east. One had a name beside it, El Cuervo. Arrival trace days. Ilias's face went cold. We were never the target, he said. They're surrounding the town. Mateo cursed again. 3 days, maybe less. Elias folded the map and slipped it into his coat. Then we ride now, he said. We tell everyone. We fortify. We prepare. What if they won't fight? Angel asked. They'll fight, Elias said. Or they'll burn. Alma walked beside him as they mounted up. Do you believe you can win this? She asked. He met her eyes. No, she didn't flinch. Then why try? Because if we don't stand, Elias said, there won't be anything left to lose. She nodded, understanding that as they turned toward the town. Elias looked once more at the canyon behind them. 6 men dead. A warning given, a war coming. And in the pit of his stomach, he knew El Cuervo wasn't coming for revenge. He was coming to replace something. To erase something. To write his name over all of theirs in blood. But not yet. Not while Elias still had breath. If this town falls, it won't be because I let it, Elias said. It'll be because I died standing. Santa Perdida had always been a sleepy town, the kind of place where the days bled together and time moved slower than the wind. But not today. By sunrise, the streets were filled with movement. Doors slammed open. Boots pounded across porches. Men shouted names down alleyways, and the church bell unused for anything but Sunday morning rang twice, sharp and shrill. Elias Redhawk stood in the middle of it all, one hand on his hip, the other pointing. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. The quiet weight of his voice, the urgency in his eyes, did more than barked orders ever could. Barricade the northern trail. Use lumber from the stable ruins. Set the fences in a V. Anyone with a hunting rifle, post them near the saloon roofline. The men and women of Santa Perdida didn't ask questions, not today. Angel moved through the crowd, passing out rounds and makeshift bandoliers. Marisol, barely 15, helped stack crates of supplies near the general store. Even old Senora Lopez, who hadn't left her rocking chair in years, sat stitching torn shirts with a thimble like a weapon. Alma turned her clinic into a triage center. I want the pews from the chapel dragged in here, she ordered. Blankets, boiled water, clean rags, whiskey, anything sterile. 2 ranch hands obeyed without a word. Mateo stood outside the jailhouse, his shotgun slung, watching the preparations. His face was hard, tired, but there was something else in his eyes. Pride. He walked over to Elias. I never thought I'd see this town ready itself like this. The sheriff said. They're not ready, Elias replied, but they're willing, close enough. Elias nodded, toward the southern hills. They'll come from there. If El Cuervo follows his pattern, he'll strike at nightfall. Fear moves easier in the dark. You sure about that? No, Elias said, but I've known him long enough to guess. By mid-afternoon, they had built enough defenses to slow a small force. Not stop them, just slow. Spiked barricades lined the north and east roads. Bottles filled with oil and cloth waited on the rooftops. Barrels of water and food were stacked behind the saloon, marked for emergency use. Elias took stock. The town had 21 able-bodied men, 5 women willing to fight, 2 hunting dogs, and a schoolteacher who'd shot a rattlesnake clean through the eye last summer. Not enough, but maybe enough to matter. Angel found him near the back of the chapel, hammering nails into a row of beams. You really think he'll come in guns blazing? Angel asked. No, that's not his style. Then what? Elias set the hammer down. He'll try to break us before he fights us. Divide, confuse. He'll go after something personal. Angel's brow furrowed. Alma. Elias didn't answer. Didn't need to. Just before sundown, Alma pulled Elias aside. They stood behind the clinic, away from the noise. "You haven't slept," she said. "Neither have you." "I wasn't planning to." She handed him a flask, whiskey strong. He took a sip and handed it back. "Thanks." Alma looked out over the rooftops. "They're scared. They should be. They trust you." "They shouldn't." Alma looked at him. "But I do." That stung more than it should have. Elias turned away, jaw flexing. "You never told me what happened between you and El Curvo," she said quietly. He hesitated. "Then, we grew up together. Same tribe, same scars, fought side by side, but he wanted power more than peace. He killed a village elder during a raid. An innocent man, said it was justified, and you—" "I put a bullet in his leg and walked away." She nodded slowly. "You didn't kill him?" "No." "Why?" Elias looked her dead in the eyes. "Because I saw myself in him, and that scared the hell out of me." A beat of silence. Alma touched his arm. "Just once. You're not him, Elias." "Maybe not, but I was closer than I'll ever admit." At dusk, everything went still. The townsfolk took their places, rifles cocked, lanterns doused, children hid in cellars. A sharp wind swept through the streets, carrying the scent of mesquite and blood. Elias stood at the heart of it all, rifle in hand, eyes scanning every shadow. Then came the first sound. Hoofbeats. Low, slow, purposeful. From the west, a single rider. He stopped at the edge of town, just beyond the reach of the barricade. He wore black, no insignia, no weapon drawn, just a note in his hand. Elias stepped forward, rifle raised. The rider held out the paper. "Message from El Curvo." "Speak it," Elias growled. The man's voice was steady. "He offers you one chance. Leave by dawn. Leave the woman. Leave the town. No one else dies." Elias said nothing. The rider waited. Then Elias raised his rifle, aimed just above the man's head, and fired. The bullet hit the bell tower behind him with a clang that echoed down every street. "You can tell him this," Elias said. "We don't leave, we don't kneel, and we don't forget." The rider didn't flinch, but he turned and rode back the way he came. Elias turned to the watching townsfolk. "He's coming." Mateo loaded a shell into his shotgun, then let him. That night, the air pressed down like a held breath. The moon rose red, veiled by clouds. Elias walked the streets once more, checking every door, every rooftop, every line of defense. His mind ran through every scenario, every shot, every weakness. He stopped outside the clinic. Alma waited on the steps. She didn't speak, neither did he. She just reached out and placed her hand on his chest, over his heart, and for a moment, the war disappeared. Then she said the words that stayed with him long after she'd gone inside. "If they come for me, don't save me to lose yourself." The morning after the rider came and went, Santa Perdida woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that creeps under your skin, thick with waiting. Even the dogs didn't bark. Even the wind didn't speak. Elias stood on the balcony above the saloon, looking out over a town on the edge. Below him, people moved like shadows, quick, quiet, focused. No laughter, no idle chatter, just the grim rhythm of a place tightening its belt before a fight. He hadn't slept, couldn't, not after Alma's words. "If they come for me, don't save me to lose yourself." He hated how much that sentence burrowed into him. It was more than a warning, it was a test, a boundary, one he wasn't sure he could keep, not if it came to her. Mateo joined him at the railing, chewing a toothpick like it might hold the world together. "They didn't strike last night," the sheriff muttered. "Why? They want fear to do the work for them," Elias replied. "A slow burn. Doubt. People start asking themselves if it's worth dying for a place like this." Mateo spit the toothpick into the dirt. "It is, I know that," Elias said, "but not everyone's built for fire." At noon, smoke rose from the northern trail. Elias, Angel, and Mateo rode out fast, rifles drawn, dust rising behind them like a banner. The closer they got, the more the air soured with the smell of ash. They found the remains of a wagon. Its wheels still smoldered. Cargo spilled and torched. Dried blood painted the rocks. Whoever it had been, traders, messengers, maybe just a family passing through. They were gone now, not dead. Taken. Angel crouched near the wagon bed. "No bodies. They want leverage," Elias said. "Or bait." Mateo scanned the horizon. "Tracks go south, toward the canyon rim." Elias nodded. "That's where they'll stage." He turned back toward the town, eyes narrowed. "Tonight, It'll be tonight. Back in town, Alma organized her supplies with clinical precision. Everything had a place: bandages, morphine, stitching thread, clean water. She labeled the tables by injury severity, then moved to the back and scrubbed her hands until they were raw. Marisol watched her with a furrowed brow. "Are you scared?" Alma paused, then looked the girl in the eye. "Yes, but I know what to do with fear." "What's that?" "Use it to stay sharp." The girl nodded. "Will you fight if it comes to that?" "And Elias," Alma hesitated, "he'll bleed before he bends." Marisol didn't ask what that meant. She didn't need to. As the sun sank, Elias sat alone in the church. He hadn't been in there since he first arrived. It still smelled like dust and candles. The pews were scratched with old initials, the altar simple and unadorned. He sat in the back, hat in his lap, rifle leaning against the seat beside him. It wasn't prayer, not exactly. He didn't believe in heaven or hell, not in the way most people did, but he believed in consequence, and tonight felt like the kind that would echo. The door creaked. Open. Alma slipped in and sat beside him. "You ever been baptized?" she asked softly. Elias gave a humorless smile. "Once, didn't take." "Me neither." They sat in silence. Then she said, "What are you thinking?" "That I've been in a lot of fights, lost more than I care to admit, but this one feels different, because it's for someone else." He nodded. Double quotes. "And if you die?" she asked, voice almost too quiet. He looked at her. "Then I hope it's worth something." Alma reached out and took his hand. They didn't speak again. Night came. The first attack hit just after midnight. It started with fire-oil bottles hurled at rooftops, igniting the edge of the general store and the barn. Then the gunshots, sharp and scattered, testing the defenses. Elias moved fast. He barked orders down the street, putting out the fire with help from Mateo and 2 ranch hands. Angel picked off a rider from the clock tower clean between the eyes. Alma rushed to the saloon, where a boy had taken shrapnel to the thigh. She worked by lantern light, hands steady even as bullets echoed outside. Sombra Roja came in waves, never all at once. They struck, pulled back, struck again, probing, wearing the town down inch by 2 a.m. The west wall was compromised. Elias ordered a retreat to the inner street, using wagons and crates as makeshift cover. Marisol was hit in the shoulder. Alma stopped the bleeding in less than a minute. "You're gonna be fine," she told the girl. "You're stronger than you look." "You sound like Elias," Marisol groaned. Alma smiled tightly. "That means I'm right." Elias reloaded behind the blacksmith's forge, his shirt soaked through with sweat and smoke. He could hear Angel shouting over the din. "They're moving toward the clinic." He moved fast. Too fast. By the time he reached the alley behind the clinic, 2 of Curvo's men were already there, blades drawn, slipping in through the back. He didn't shout, he didn't warn, he just shot one clean through the chest, then lunged at the second, tackling him into the dirt. They writhed, twisting until Elias smashed the man's head into the stone wall. Blood spilled into the dust. He stumbled into the clinic just as Alma turned. For a moment, their eyes locked. Her hands were covered in someone else's blood. His face was scraped, jaw clenched. "They tried to flank," he said. "I know." She didn't ask if he was okay. He didn't ask her to be careful. There was no time for that. By dawn, the gunfire slowed. Sombra Roja pulled back. The fires were mostly out. The bodies in the street were being counted: 5 from the town, 11 of the enemy. It wasn't over. Not yet, but they'd held. Elias stood in the middle of the main road, chest rising and falling with exhaustion. His hand ached. His ribs screamed. But he was still breathing. Mateo limped up beside him. "Why'd they retreat?" "They weren't trying to win," Elias said. "They were sending a message, which is that Curvo doesn't need to destroy us in one night. He can bleed us over time." Mateo shook his head. "This ain't war. It's theater." Elias looked toward the horizon. "No," he said. "It's personal." Alma found him sitting on the edge of the well, elbows on his knees, covered in dust and dried blood. "You saved the clinic," she said. "You saved the girl." They didn't smile. Didn't need to. Then she said quietly, "You ever think maybe you're not meant to survive this?" Elias looked up at her, eyes hollow. "Every damn day." "I don't fight because I think I'll live," Elias whispered. "I fight because I refuse to die quiet." The morning after the raid, the sky over Santa Perdida hung low and gray. like the desert had finally remembered how to grieve. Elias stood on the roof of the old boarding house, watching smoke curl from the blackened frame of the barn. The wind carried the scent of scorched timber, blood, and something heavy. Below, townsfolk worked in silence to clear the wreckage. Broken glass, spent shells, twisted metal. A church bell lay cracked in the dirt. Marisol had survived. Barely. 2 ranchers had not. They buried them at dawn. Mateo stood beside Elias, arms crossed, shotgun slung over one shoulder. He looked 10 years older today. They'll come again, he said. Soon. Elias nodded. Tonight, maybe. Do we even have enough left to stop them? Elias didn't answer right away. Then, we don't need everyone to fight. We just need everyone to believe. Mateo gave a bitter half-smile. You should have been a preacher. I tried once, Elias said. Didn't take. Inside the clinic, Alma worked without pause. Her hands moved on muscle memory. Wrap, tie, disinfect, stitch. Her voice never wavered, not even when a man cried out or a child whimpered under her breath. She moved like a soldier in a field hospital, sharp and relentless. Angel stood by the door, watching the hall. You should rest, he said. So should you. He nodded but didn't move. You think we can win this? She asked. Angel hesitated. I think we have to. That's enough. Outside, a boy ran down the street, panting. Riders, he shouted, coming from the east. Elias didn't hesitate. He leaped from the roof, boots hitting the dirt hard, and ran. But it wasn't Sambra Roja. It was 2 riders in worn coats, both bloodied, barely holding to their saddles. One collapsed as soon as he dismounted. The other, a woman in a faded cavalry jacket, slid from her horse and walked straight to Elias. I'm looking for Red Hawk, she said. You found him? She nodded, eyes like cracked stone. Name's Sloan. Used to run with Curve. Not anymore. Elias narrowed his eyes. Why come here? Because he's not just coming to wipe this town. He's building something, turning every outlaw raider and stray into a cause. You don't kill him now, there won't be towns left to save. Mateo joined them. You expect us to trust you? No, Sloan said. I expect you to listen. She tossed a bloodied map at Ilias's feet. It showed supply lines, camps, names. He's planning a full siege, not just a raid. He wants this place as an example. Elias picked up the map. We'll need help, he said. You won't get it, Sloan replied. No one's coming. That night, Elias called a town meeting in the chapel. Every able body, every shaking hand, every bloodshot eye filled the pews. Elias stood at the pulpit, not with a Bible, but with the map. They're not done, he said. This isn't about land, it's about control. El Curvo wants to prove that hope dies in the dust. That peace is weakness. He let the silence hang. I've seen what he builds. I helped tear it down once. I didn't finish the job. That mistake is on me. A murmur spread, but I won't run from it now. I'm not asking you to be soldiers. I'm asking you to be stubborn, to be loud, to remind him that even here, even now, we won't be erased. Alma watched from the back, arms crossed, face unreadable. Elias looked at her, then back to the crowd. We don't beat him with numbers. We beat him by outlasting him, by showing him there's still something in this world he can't burn. He paused. I was born with a rifle in my hands, but I finally understand what it's for. Later, as the chapel emptied, Alma approached him. That was a good speech, she said. It wasn't a speech. No, she said. It was a confession. He looked at her. You ever wonder what we'd be if this hadn't found us? Alma didn't smile. We'd still be fighting, just something else. He nodded. Then she said, don't die tomorrow. I'll try. Don't try, she whispered. Decide. That night, as Elias sat sharpening his knife under the moonlight, Angel came and sat across from him. You know he's coming for you, Angel said. I'm counting on it. You think you can beat him? No, Elias said, but I can bleed him enough to matter. Angel handed him a locket. From my mother, he said. She told me to give it to the man who made me believe again. Elias looked down at its simple silver, dented, warm from Angel's hand. He said nothing, just nodded, then stared out into the dark, toward the hills, where somewhere in the night, El Curvo waited. I was born with a rifle in my hands, Elias whispered, but now I know why I was aiming. The first shot came before sunrise, a single crack in the stillness so sharp, so sudden. The birds scattered from the rooftops before anyone even registered what had happened. Elias, was already moving. By the time the second shot followed, he'd grabbed his rifle, shouted orders from the saloon steps, and sprinted toward the barricades. The eastern ridge where the land dipped low into scrub brush and dead mesquite was shrouded in morning fog. It was the perfect cover. Curvo had waited for this, had watched the skies. Mateo joined him at the main street. There in the brush. Can't see how many. We'll draw them out, Elias said, checking his rounds. Force them to come close. The townsfolk were already in motion. Alma moved through the back alleys, organizing the wounded from the last raid. Angel took position on the water tower, his scope sweeping the ground like a hawk's eye. Sloan, grizzled, scarred, still smelling of gunpowder and grit, stood beside Elias, a sword-off in each hand. Curvo's changed tactics, she said. He's probing, finding weak spots. Let him try. She gave him a sidelong look. You ready for this? Elias didn't blink. I was born in the middle of fire. The ambush lasted half an hour, just enough to shake the town, burn a few buildings, and vanish before retaliation could stick. Curvo's men moved like ghosts, striking and disappearing, leaving confusion in their wake. By the time the smoke cleared, 2 more defenders were dead. One was 17. Elias stood over the boy's body. His hands didn't tremble, not on the outside, but Alma saw it, saw the way his jaw locked, the way his thumb rubbed the stock of his rifle like a prayer. This isn't a battle, she said. It's a slow death, I know. Then stop letting him decide the terms. He looked at her. We can't strike first. We don't have the numbers. Then change the rules. That afternoon, they set traps. Real one-strip wires, buried spikes, Molotov cocktails, disguised in feed sacks, but also traps of the mind, false trails of blood, a wagon made to look like it carried ammunition, but was filled with gravel. They left signals in the sand. Old tribal signs meant to spook anyone watching. They wanted Curvo to wonder, and he did. The scouts returned that evening with strange news. Curvo's camp had split. Some had moved east, some had gone silent. It's working, Angel said. They're trying to guess our next move. Elias stared at the horizon. They won't have to guess for long. That night, Elias gathered his team: Angel, Mateo, Sloan, and Almi in the sheriff's office. A single lantern lit the space. We ride at midnight, he said, straight into the canyon. We find Curvo's forward camp and burn it to ash. Mateo frowned. You're sure that's smart? No, but it's necessary. Angel leaned in. What if it's a trap? It is, Elias said, but this time, it's ours. He laid the map out. If we hit them where they don't expect us, we force Curvo to move, to react. That gives us a window to prepare for the real fight. Alma stared at him. And if you don't come back? He looked at her, steady. Then light the sky. Make them think I did. She didn't speak, didn't have to. The canyon loomed like an open mouth. They rode fast, cutting through the dark with only moonlight and memory to guide them. No torches, no words, just hooves against dust and the dry rhythm of breath. They reached the outer ridge by 2A.M. Elias dismounted first, crouched low behind a boulder. Below, tucked in the fold of the land, Curvo's forward camp pulsed with faint light lanterns, scattered fires, the clink of steel. Maybe 20 men, maybe more. He signaled. Sloan and Angel flanked right. Mateo circled left. Alma stayed behind with the horses, rifle in hand. Jaw clenched. Elias moved like shadow. He planted charges on the supply. 10 soil-soaked bags of gunpowder laced with nails. Each fuse was set to burn slow. 5 minutes. Then he waited, watched the wind, prayed to nothing, and lit the first match. The explosion tore through the canyon like thunder from God. Fire bloomed. Men screamed. Chaos unfolded. Elias fired from above, picking targets with surgical precision. Angel's rifle cracked like punctuation. Sloan moved through the flames like a devil out of legend. By the time Curvo's men regrouped, half their munitions were gone. The canyon was a furnace. Elias signaled retreat. They pulled back fast, leaving smoke and fire behind them. By dawn, they were back in Santa Perda. Exhausted. Bloodied. But alive. The town stirred at their return. Whispers spread. They struck Curvo's camp. They lived. Maybe we have a chance. Elias ignored the voices. He went straight to the chapel, knelt beside the altar, and stayed there. Alma found him an hour later. You didn't have to go, she said. I did. She stepped closer. For them, for me. She knelt beside him. What now? Elias opened his eyes. They burned with smoke and something deeper. Now we wait. And when he comes, I want him to look at this town and feel something he never expected. What's that? Elias stood. Doubt you come for ghosts. You better bring a shovel. For the first time in weeks, the town of Santa Perdida slept. Not soundly, not without nightmares, but the kind of sleep that comes after doing something unthinkable and surviving it. The raid on Cuervo's forward camp had changed the rhythm of things. Folks walked a little taller. Doors stayed open longer. Kids whispered about Red Hawk like he was part ghost, part thunder. But Elias knew better. Cuervo would answer. It was just a question of when. He spent the following day reinforcing every defense. Barrels of rainwater became shields. Iron farm tools were repurposed into spear traps. Fire lines were set along the rooftops, with buckets of sand and oil waiting near every window. Angel drew up sniper perches from the clock tower to the bell. Mateo sharpened every blade in town. They had maybe one shot left, and it was coming fast. Alma moved through the crowd at midday, checking on families, tending to wounds that had reopened. Her hands moved out of habit, but her eyes never stopped searching. She found Elias at the forge, hammering a broken rifle stock into something brutal, a short-handled bludgeon with iron spikes at the tip. "That's not regulation," she said. "Neither is survival." She watched him for a moment, the way his shoulders moved, tight and efficient. "I heard the scout," she said. "Cuervo's forces are gathering again." He paused. "How many?" "Too many." Elias didn't look up. "We hit him hard, took out his supplies. He'll be reckless now. That makes him dangerous but also predictable. He'll come for the center of town," she said. "Force us into a single front, unless we split him first." She stepped closer. "You mean draw him in?" "I mean bait him." That evening, the trap was set. They lit torches along the southern ridge to make it appear heavily guarded. Barrels filled with scrap iron were dropped down wells to make noise when hit. Children were hidden in the abandoned mine tunnels. Watched over by the schoolteacher and Marisol, Angel took up a post near the grain silo, rifle steady. Elias stood at the main gate, wind tugging at his coat. The last piece of the trap was the saloon left open. Lights on, windows shuttered. A perfect lure, but inside it wasn't. Empty. It was Alma. And she knew exactly what she was doing. Cuervo came just after. Moonrise. Not with chaos but with order. Walked ahead of his riders, all black coat and polished boots, the moon glinting off the blade at his hip. His men fanned out like smoke behind him. Silent, waiting. Elias stepped forward. The two men faced each other in the middle of a dirt street that had seen too many funerals. Elias Redoc. Cuervo Said. His voice as smooth as a sermon. "Daniel," Elias replied flatly. "You still using my name like it means something?" Elias didn't blink. "It used to." Cuervo smiled, slow and cold. "You always did think this world had rules. It doesn't. It only has winners. And ghosts." "You're not building anything," Elias said. "You're feeding off what's already dying. And yet here you are." Cuervo gestured to the town, clinging to the ashes like they'll light themselves. "I've seen fire take a forest and still miss one seed." Cuervo stepped closer, then burn with it. He raised a hand. His men charged. The battle was instant. Explosions from the east, wall-rigged barrels igniting under pressure, arrows from rooftops, gunfire like a drumline. Smoke choked the alleys. Not Mateo led a charge from the livery stable, catching two raiders by surprise. Angel dropped 3 from the tower. Sloan moved like death through the northern flank, but it was Alma who drew them in. Cuervo's second wave stormed the saloon. She waited in the dark, rifle across her lap, breath slow and quiet. The first man through caught buckshot to the chest. The second made it 2 steps before she slit his throat with a scalpel. The third grabbed her by the hair. She drove a broken glass into his neck. Outside, Elias moved through fire. He was a storm in boots, rifled blade, fists, no hesitation, just purpose. He saw Cuervo watching him. He smiled. "Come on, old friend," Elias muttered. "Let's finish it." Cuervo stepped into the fight like a man stepping into his own funeral. He drew his blade. Elias sheathed his rifle. They met in the center of town, surrounded by screams and dust. "Last chance," Cuervo said. "Say that to yourself," Elias replied. They fought like wolves. Every swing was history. Every dodge was a shared memory. They knew each other's moves. Each counter came with a scar to match. Cuervo was faster. Elias was meaner. Steel met steel, then flesh. Elias took a cut to the ribs. Curvo took a blow to the jaw that sent a tooth flying. I should have killed you in the canyon, Curvo hissed. You tried. Curvo slashed. Elias caught the blade in his palm, blood running hot, and drove his head into Curvo's nose. The warlord stumbled. Elias kicked him hard, sending him into the dirt. He raised his blade. Curvo grinned through blood. Do it, he said. Be like me. Elias hesitated, then lowered the blade. You already lost. Curvo's smile faded. Alma appeared behind him, rifle aimed. You ever touch this town again, she said. I finish what he won't. Curvo looked at both of them, bleeding, beaten. Then laughed. You think this ends with me? Elias stepped forward. No, he said. It ends when we say it does. Some men burn the world to feel tall. Ilios whispered. But I'd rather plant something and die waiting for it to bloom. The town was still burning when the sun came up. The fires had died down to smoldering cinders, but the heat remained in the wood, the stones, and in the air between the townsfolk. Black smoke curled from the saloon windows. Blood had dried in the dirt. The bell tower was half collapsed, its spire leaning like a broken tooth. And in the middle of Main Street, Curvo was gone, disappeared into the night, dragged off by the few loyalists who hadn't bled out or vanished in the chaos. No one saw where he went. No one followed. Not yet. Elias stood at the water pump, shirt half torn, hands caked with soot and blood. He stared into the trough, not to clean himself, but because he didn't trust the stillness. Every time Santa Perdida went quiet, it meant death was close. Angel limped up beside him. His arm was wrapped tight from a graze. He's not dead. No, Elias said. Angel spat into the dirt. Then we'll have to finish it. Elias didn't answer. The town was still breathing, but just barely. Alma worked through the morning, moving like a ghost in her own clinic. Her hands moved without pause, suturing a thigh, disinfecting a cracked jaw, setting a dislocated shoulder. But her thoughts were somewhere else, back on the street, back at the moment when she held Curvo in her sights, and didn't pull the trigger. She had no regret, but she had questions. Marisol helped, quieter than usual. Her arm was in a sling, but she refused to stop working. Do you think he'll come back? She asked. Alma looked up from her patient. No, she said. He'll send someone worse. By late afternoon, they held a meeting in the chapel. Only a few pews remained intact. A single lantern swayed from the rafters, casting long shadows. Elias stood before them, dusty, scraped, and tired. He held a map in one hand and a blood-stained hat in the other. He's not done, he told them. You know that. I know that. He'll be licking his wounds, somewhere out in the canyons. But when he rises again, it won't be as a warlord. He looked around the room. It'll be as a ghost. And ghosts don't need guns to haunt you. A murmur spread through the room. Mateo asked. So what do we do? Elias unrolled the map on the altar. We finish what we started. We track him. We bring him in, dead or alive. We make sure no one else has to suffer what this town did. Someone asked, what if we fail? Elias looked up, voice low and sharp. Then we try again, and again, until there's nothing left of him to bury. Later that evening, Alma found him alone behind the chapel, sharpening his blade. You meant what you said? She asked. He nodded. You're leaving. I have to. She sat down beside him. You could stay, rebuild, help them start over. Elias shook his head. I'm not made for peace. I'm the kind of man peace hides from. Alma stared at him. You think this is all you are? He looked her in the eyes. I think this is all that's left. She said nothing for a long time. Then, you don't have to go alone. I won't ask you to follow. You don't have to. That night, Angel came to Elias with 2 horses. Found tracks, he said. North Ridge, big ones. Fresh, Cuervo, has to be. Elias strapped his rifle. Let's ride. But Mateo stopped them at the edge of town. You leave now. You're not coming back the same. Elias nodded. I know. Mateo offered a hand. Then ride hard. Bring him down. Elias shook it. Angel tipped his hat to Marisol, who stood behind Mateo with tears in her eyes. She tried to smile. Failed. Come back, she said. Angel grinned. Only if I can bring you stories. They rode into the night. The moon was high, the stars sharp. The trail was rough, silent, but Elias didn't need light to know he was on the right path. He could feel it, like gravity, like hate, like fate. By dawn, they reached a burnt-out post on the edge of Bone Gulch. The ashes were fresh. The wind carried copper. Elias dismounted and crouched beside the fire pit. They're close, Angel checked his rifle. Then so are we. But just as he stood, a single gunshot cracked from the ridge. Angel staggered. Blood bloomed across his side. Elias dove for cover. Dragging Angel behind a boulder, another shot rang out. Closer this time, Curvo's men had expected them. A trap. Elias pressed hard on Angel's wound. Stay with me. Angel gritted his teeth. Just a scratch. It's a hole, Angel. You always were dramatic. Elias smirked, despite himself. They waited. No more shots came. Whoever had fired was either Gunor waiting for them to make the next move. Elias wrapped Angel's side tight with his own shirt. Then he looked out over the canyon. Curvo was near. He could feel it in his bones. And this time, he wouldn't just be hunting. He'd be finishing something older than either of them had ever dared admit. I'm not chasing vengeance, Elias whispered. I'm chasing the part of me he never stole. The trail ended at the mouth of a forgotten canyon, a narrow, jagged wound carved deep into the land, where even the vultures flew wide. The sun was just cresting the red cliffs, lighting the stone walls with a soft gold that didn't match the blood beneath it. Elias knelt beside Angel, who leaned against a rock, pale but conscious. The bleeding had slowed, but every breath came shallow. You sure you can hold here? Elias asked. Angel nodded once. You'll need someone watching your back if things go to hell. They already did. He squeezed Angel's shoulder, then rose and followed the trail of hoofprints and boot scuffs. Deeper into the canyon. Every step felt heavier than the last. The air shifted, thinner, drier. He remembered this place, not just from maps but from nightmares. Years ago, he and Curvo had ridden through here on a bounty run, before everything soured, back when they still thought they were doing good, or at least not doing harm. Now he was chasing the ghost of that mistake. He found Curvo in the dead end of the canyon. The warlord stood near a dry stream, his black coat torn and filthy, face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. No guards, no army, just a man with a revolver and a fire that hadn't quite gone out. You tracked me all this way, Curvo said, just to watch me bleed. Elias didn't raise his rifle. I tracked you to end it. Curvo snorted. End what? This fight, this place, the way men like us are made. I'm not like you. Don't lie, Red. You've killed in the same dirt, breathed the same gunsmoke. You and me were carved from the same rotten wood. Elias stepped forward. Maybe we started the same, but I chose something else. What? Curvo sneered. Honor, peace. You think patching up a dying town makes you clean? No, Elias said quietly. But it makes me human. Curvo's hand twitched. Elias didn't move. You gonna draw? Elias asked. Not yet, Curvo said. You ever think about how it could have gone if we'd just stayed out of it all, taken the money, built our own place? Elias nodded. I think about it every damn day. Then why not walk away? Elias' voice was low, steady, because ghosts don't rest on their own. Curvo smiled, a sad, bitter thing. Then he drew. Elias was faster. The shot rang once, sharp as a nail. Curvo dropped to one knee, blood blooming across his chest. He fell back into the dust, breathing, but barely. Elias walked to him, stood over the body of the man who had once been his brother in arms. Curvo coughed. So that's it? No, Elias said. That's mercy. He knelt, took Curvo's revolver, and tossed it into the canyon. Then he sat beside him. Why? Curvo rasped. Because someone has to bury the last piece of this. Curvo closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, whatever fire had lived there was gone. They burned the body on a pyre made from driftwood and bone-dry sagebrush. The smoke rose into the canyon like a final offering. Elias stood beside Angel, who had managed to limp close enough to watch. Neither of them spoke until the flames died down. Then Angel said, You could have let him live. No, Elias replied. I already did that once. And now I ride home. Santa Perdida looked different in the morning light. The scars were still there, burned walls, boarded windows, shallow graves along the east ridge, but there was a stillness now that didn't feel like fear. It felt like breath. It felt like hope. Alma met him at the edge of town. You finish it? She asked. Elias nodded. Was it justice? No, he said. It was necessary. She didn't ask for details. He didn't offer them. They walked together through the center of town. People stopped and watched, not with awe or fear, but with something close to gratitude. Children ran barefoot across the dust. Someone played a guitar from a porch. A woman hung laundry in the sun. It wasn't peace, but it was something close. Mateo approached, limping. We heard the shot. Figured it was you. It was both of us, Elias said. But Mateo held out a piece of paper, started drawing this up. Town wants a name for the square. Elias unfolded it at the top. Red Hawk Circle. He shook his head. No. Then what? Mateo asked. Elias handed the paper back. Call it Perdidas Rest. That night, they held a service. Not for Curvo, for the ones they'd lost. Names were read, candles lit. A bell rang once for every soul who hadn't come back. Alma spoke. So did Mateo and Eben Angel from his cart. Elias stayed at the back, hat in hand, eyes on the flame. When the last bell rang, he stepped out into the dark. Alma followed. You leaving again? She asked. He looked at her. Should I? I think, she said. You finally stopped running. He nodded. Then maybe I'll learn how to stay. The next morning, Elias stood at the fence line, looking out over the land beyond Santa Perdida. He could still feel the dust of other towns. Still, hear the ghosts of men he couldn't save. But they didn't pull at him the same way. He felt something shift. Not silence, not pain, just stillness. He took a breath. And for the first time in years, it wasn't heavy. Some men ride to run. Others ride to return. But the lucky ones, Elias whispered, turning toward the sunrise, they ride until something finally lets them stop.